For those of you who don't know, I and the rest of my family got COVID at the end of December, the very beginning of January. I was not anxious about this whatsoever. I actually felt a little bit relieved, like, oh, we've got it, now it will be over with. Let's just plow through this, it's gonna be fine. Then the days started to drag on and on. You count from the day your symptoms first started. It's day 3, it's not that bad. Like, I can totally live with this. It's day 5, well, it's a little worse. Surely it's almost over. Then it's day 10. Not only is it still going, but there's no relief in sight. And at this point, I start losing it a bit. I had been doing a lot of work for the live stream event. Maybe you came, I'll link it down below if you didn't. But I had been making 2 very intense videos. Probably each video took me 60 hours. So I was completely depleted. Plus I had COVID and I started really breaking down. So embarrassing. On video with friends, just crying. This is not like me. But it's like I had nothing left in my tank, not physically, emotionally, mentally. And this started around day 10. And it just kept getting worse. So I've got a really good friend who's a nurse practitioner. And she had told me, threatened me, that if my oxygen levels got into the 80s, I was to go straight to the emergency room. Well, it had been in the 80s. And I was just watching it. You like put the thing on your finger. And I just kept thinking, surely it's gonna get better. Well, then I got to where like I just couldn't even walk, do a loop around the inside of my house. I just couldn't walk very far. And so it was 3 a.m. on January 16th, which happens to be my birthday. And I woke up Jared and I was like, something just did not feel right in my body. And so I'm like, fine, I've gotta go to the hospital. You've gotta take me to the ER. Something's not right. I can feel it. I think I need help. So we went to the ER. I'm still not anxious. I did not want to go to the hospital. I just wanted to stay at home and recover. But I thought maybe I'll go to the ER and they're just gonna give me some medicine and then send me home and then I'll start to get better. Once we got to the ER, I'm realizing that I have to go in by myself. Jared's not able to go in with me. Well, that's fine, because I'm just gonna come right back out and come home. Well, once I get into the ER room, the nurse has me hooked up to the heart monitor and the oxygen monitor where they're monitoring both those things. And she wants me to walk. I couldn't walk very far, like 4 steps, but she wanted me to walk and to see what happened. So as I walked, my heart rate would rev, like it would go up to like 135 or 140, and then my oxygen would go down, way down into the 80s. She had said it's like your heart's trying to rev up the system to be like, let's still breathe and let's still stay alive. So she had me sit back down, they put me on oxygen, and I'm still thinking, okay, see, I am sick, so just give me something and then let me go home, please. I asked her for some water because I was really parched. Here's where the anxiety began. She said, no, because we need to make sure that you don't have a blood clot in your lung. I'm like, well, what does that mean? She's like, well, just in case you have to go in for a procedure. No, now I'm anxious. Now I'm realizing how alone I am. Those were feeding off of one another. And so they did the chest x-ray. The ER doctor comes back in and she's like, you've got COVID lungs. We can see COVID in your lungs, whatever that means. She said, we're gonna start you on steroids immediately through an IV and we're gonna admit you. Once I get into my hospital room, I ask her, how long am I gonna be in here? And she says, oh, it could be a few days or a few weeks. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. What should I expect? She's like, well, either the steroids are going to help you or they're not. What ifs start coming into my brain. So you've got to remember, I'm completely depleted, both physically, mentally, emotionally, all of it, just depleted. Because when my friends were saying, how are you doing? I would say, I'm scared and I'm lonely. I'm scared and I'm all alone. That's how I'm doing. And I said, I'm having a lot of what ifs. So I'm picturing in my mind, what if I'm here in this hospital room alone? What if I have to go on a ventilator? What if the steroids don't work? And I'm alone, like not even to have my husband beside me as I'm going through something scary. So I said, I'm scared, I'm alone, and I have a lot of what ifs happening. And I had one friend text me back and she said this, it's something that her and I have talked about over and over. It is a practice that I have done for probably the last decade or longer. But I totally forgot in the moment. Like, I needed her to remind me of this practice that I thought was so ingrained in me, but I could not pull it up by myself. As believers, we need one another. Romans 12 would say it this way: we're a part of the body. If we're in Christ, we're a part of this body, and this body belongs to one another. And so here's what she said: take your what ifs all the way to the end and find him there. So take your what ifs, Melissa, the ventilator, the ICU, death, take it all the way to the end, and then look for God. Where is he? Find him. Focus on him. What is true, even at that moment? What is true? And so what I did not do was just dwell on gloom and doom. Instead, I took those what ifs that tend to circle. I don't know if you know what this means, but with my anxiety, it will tend to loop. It never finishes the loop. It's just, what if I get put on a ventilator? What would that feel like? What if I get put on a ventilator? Would Jared be able to be in here for that? It never quite finishes the story in my head. It just loops and loops. So what I did was just that. I took my fear of really being alone and being in pain, not knowing what's gonna happen, and took it all the way to the end. Then I'm on the inside of me. I'm looking around, so I'm like, I'm in the ICU, I'm on a ventilator or not, whatever. I'm very, very sick and the medication's not working. Find him. What is true? And that is when I stop and pause, and on the inside of me, I'm just looking for him. This does not mean even in the moment that I felt this great presence of God. I didn't. But I'm like, what is true about who he is? He's always been there when I needed him. There's always grace poured over me. He'll be there, Melissa. He'll be there when you need him. He always has, even with the death of our 2-year-old daughter. How much was he just right there when you needed him? Why would his grace and his love and his compassion and his kindness not be that close if you get to that point in your life? And I'm like, well, Melissa, if you die and it's a scary process and you don't know what's happening, do you believe that after this body is gone, that you will be with him? Yes. Do you really believe it? The first time when I say facing death, I was not anywhere near facing death. But what I didn't know, especially that first day, was, am I gonna go worse or am I gonna get better? There was more of a possibility of death that I personally have ever had to face. Even though I wasn't deathly ill, it was, I'm not deathly ill yet. We don't know which way this thing is gonna turn. With that in mind, of somewhat of a possibility of death in mind, do you believe that he is the most beautiful, the most kind, the most loving, the most compassionate being in the universe? Yes, I do believe that. Do you believe that you will be ushered into his presence when you're not in this body? Yeah, actually, I really do believe it. And as I did this process of looking for him at the very end of my what if, looking for him, I could feel the anxiety coming down. That did not mean it went away, but I could feel it coming down, and I could feel this peace kind of in the middle of still this afraid feeling, lonely feeling, but this peace where I was able to just breathe a little deeper and a little better. I'm still practicing taking my what ifs all the way to the end and looking for him. I hope that's somewhat helpful to you, but I do want to say I also see a counselor who I'm being very honest with this anxiety and depression that I'm feeling. I'm talking openly with my husband, with friends about this. I have gone to the doctor. So what I'm not saying is just take some little trick and it's going to cure deep-rooted anxiety. You may need to go to the doctor, to go to a counselor she's got like things behind her name. You may need more support, just like me, in your anxiety. And if you do, please seek the help of professionals. They are a grace given to us by God. That's it for today. If you have not subscribed, I hope you will. If this was helpful to you, I hope you'll share it with a friend. And until next time, bye. The staff was absolutely amazing at Lynchburg General. The food, not so much. When I opened up the sandwich and saw this laying on the bun, it took me about 12 seconds to figure out what it was. It was chicken, bleach white chicken. It tasted exactly how it looked.